Testing? Okay, thank you. So for those of you that may be here for the 1 o'clock land use meeting, we just have one last item from the 9 a.m. meeting that we need to complete. We're going to get through that and then start off with land use. So for those of you here for land use, we just ask for your patience and thank you for being here. And I will just stand by a minute for waiting, I think, for Brett Waters. Or Sonny. Are we ready? Okay. All right, at this point, let's reconvene our 9 a.m. Board of County Commissioners meeting, which we recessed just before 11 o'clock. I'm sorry, actually, I left at 11 o'clock, and then the other meetings continued, and the rest are completed. So items 12 and 13 are completed, and let's bring back item number 11. So let's see, I think we were at in a place where commissioners were asking questions of either the staff or the developer or the URA team. Are there any other questions from any of the commissioners regarding item 11 at this point? And was there any information from staff that any of the commissioners still needed at this point? Okay. Oh, yes, please, come on up.
May I?
Yes, please.
Travis Easton, again, Director of Public Works for the city. I just wanted to touch on, in response to the comments earlier, about this should be a full city responsibility. And while I understand those comments, I just wanted to remind folks, I think over the last few years, I think the city and county have worked well together to really address needs for the citizens. By way of example of that, I would point to the Park Vista IGA, and you may, if you haven't already, seen that come across your desks for approval. That is a county enclave that the city has stepped up to address, and we did it because it makes sense for the citizens. Another example that I would point to is the Peterson Space Force Base. There is a lot of county property there, but the city, also having property in the area, has stepped up to really run that initiative forward because it makes sense for our military partners at Peterson. Lastly, I would remind everybody that, and we've talked about it today, the Mark Shuffle Corridor was fully in the county, a county responsibility, but the city has taken that on because, again, it makes sense for the citizens. So I just want to point that out, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Yep. All right, any other comments or testimony from the staff or anybody else? And if not, any last questions from any of the commissioners? And seeing none, I think at this point I'll entertain a motion for item.
We'll discuss it.
Oh, you have more discussion?
Yeah, I think we still have some comments, not questions of staff.
Oh, okay, great. Yeah, please. All right. Any comments from any of the commissioners? Who would like to start? Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate, again, as I said, I think the real thing that we're talking about here is what is appropriate from both sides, and that is really it's what we're getting down to is how much is appropriate, what is appropriate in all of these situations. And so one of the questions that I asked before we left, and I will say I believe that the city should be contributing more than the county. I think that's fair. And so one of the questions I asked was, how do we get to, paying a percentage but less than the city? Because there is this idea in question of what is actually the comparison here. And so one of the things I asked for Nikki Simmons to do was to let us know, how much are we paying in comparison to the city if we were to move forward with this request? So the property tax portion, as she said, is 57%. So again, we're already paying that much through property tax. Again, that's something we don't have as much room to talk about. But then what is maybe a way for us to get to 75% of what the city is contributing, so that the city is contributing more, but we are looking at what I think is a much more fair distribution of whose responsibility this is here. So the request specifically was if we were to contribute 75% of what the city is contributing, what would that look like? Property tax would be 57. The additional, and Nikki is walking up here, so maybe she is going to, oh, okay, she's got the slide up there. So getting to that roughly around 75%, and she's put it together for us to see here.
Commissioners, Nikki Simmons, Chief Financial Officer. Commissioner Geithner had asked me to put this together to show the request from the City of Colorado Springs and the request from El Paso County. You see the $2,088,000 from the City of Colorado Springs, the $1.9 million. These are the EPS numbers. And so to get to the 75% of what Colorado Springs is contributing, that amount would be approximately $1.566 million. The property taxes is taken care of with $1.19 million, so there's a remaining difference of $375,000 to get to that 75% number. And so essentially to get to about that 75% number, you're looking at a 25% sales tax contribution. And I think that's the question that Commissioner Geithner was asking, is for us to get to about 75% of what the City of Colorado Springs is contributing. What would that mean on the county side? And so what in the end, the answer is 100% of the property taxes and 25% of our 1% sales tax.
Thank you, Ms. Simmons. And so I think this is a much more fair approach to what we are talking about. And if we are looking for a collaborative compromise that makes sense from the perspective of the county and the responsibilities that there are on both entities, this is something that I would ask the board to consider, which to me seems more appropriate than the requested 50%.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Are there other comments? Yes, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate Commissioner Geithner's comments and Nikki's work on the math there. I do appreciate Travis's comments. We are not asking that the city take on the entirety of the cost. We're just simply asking that there would be a more favorable balance to what is a request. Because to be truly honest, if this was a standalone URA project without it being an originally PPRTA project, the city would probably be paying 100% property tax and 1 cent other sales tax to this project. And so it doesn't, from my perspective, look like they were putting anything else extra into it. With again, this being an original PPRTA project for the city that will, based on long-term underspending, save them approximately $4 million, which was brought up there. 25%, I think, is going to be less than $400,000. So I don't think it's unfair if we were to go down to, say, the 25% sales tax, that the city, which can go as high as 2% of the 2% of the tax. For sales tax, when they're looking at 1%, and as Mr. Walker mentioned, they rarely go over 1.75. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask that they go up to 1.25, especially since there will be significant savings by the city long-term with this. And with that, so I actually am very favorable to the 100%. Again, for the record, the city can take us to binding arbitration on that, and that's why he said there's less flexibility there on the property tax. But on the sales tax, I think it's not unreasonable for us to say 25%. The project itself as a standalone is a great benefit to the community. I do live literally 2 blocks, well, not even 2 blocks from this intersection, and I do know that it is an underutilized area. I won't get into the blighted assessment of the city and urban renewal. That is outside of the purview of the county commissioners. It's grass. I live right next to it. Doesn't offend me that it's grass, but it is clearly underutilized and could be better utilized for housing and some commercial as being requested here. For the developer, I think this is a strong project. It's a great project. I don't think you need to worry because I absolutely have faith that the city will step up and provide the extra 25% because they're saving $4 million. And for them to invest a couple of $100,000 extra to gain the benefit of millions of dollars is good policy and sound policy. And so absolutely believe the city will support you with a little bit extra coming from them. And so I'll let everybody else make their comments, but I feel supportive of the 25% sales tax. change.
All right. We do, it looks like the developer would like to make some comments, maybe in response to Commissioner Gonzalez's comments. Go ahead.
Yes, thanks. This is Ray O'Sullivan again, and I appreciate your perspective on that. What I have in my approvals is, because I just had to go through and reestablish the zoning because the boundary lines were changing because of, straightening out the expressway, et cetera. I have conditions of approval that require me to do certain things under the approval. And anything that the county doesn't contribute, I don't really have a mechanism to make the city make up the difference. That would be on me. But I also want to mention that I have an agreement with city traffic or public works, however it's defined. If I straighten out Hancock Expressway and eliminate the old Hancock Expressway thereafter, that they will make the connection because Chelton Avenue is then changing. Right now, it sweeps around and meets and comes out to Milton Proby Parkway, but now it's going to go straight, and the city has agreed to pick up, and I don't know what their costs are associated with that. They've agreed to pick up from the new traffic signal south to Milton Proby, and part of that road's in and part of the road's going to have to be built. And they've also agreed if I build the traffic stanchions that they will build the traffic signal and finish the electric and hang the lights. So I just wanted to make that comment just for your thinking.
I appreciate that, and I would just ask if the city, if there's any restrictions that will allow them to add that 0.25 or unwillingness.
Travis Easton, again, Director of Public Works. I can't speak to that agreement and any restrictions in it. I have not read it. I can tell you that the improvements that Mr. O'Sullivan just mentioned will cost the city about $2 million. And the $4 million that you threw out, I know you mentioned it this morning, you caught me off guard with it because I hadn't looked at anything. Luckily, we had that break midday, and I went back, and actually those costs we're anticipating are right around the $2 million mark. So instead of $4 million, it is $2 million. Again, we're putting in $2 million in adjacent improvements to Sheldon.
All right, thank you. Yes, Commissioner Williams.
I am of the opinion this is our third hearing on this, and for better or for worse, I think these issues should have been addressed in the first two hearings, so Mr. O'Sullivan could have come in prepared so that we could have had an actual representative here from the city, not that you aren't Mr. Easton, but have Ms. McDaniel here to address city finances, because she is the one who'd be able to speak to city finances directly, and Mr. Walker's not able to do that because he works for the URA and not for the city. And so I would make a motion to approve the original resolution for a mill levy and 0.50 sales tax if there's a person who is willing to second that.
All right. Before there's a second, I just a matter of procedure, were there any other comments from any other commissioners? Yes, Commissioner Bremer.
Yes. I think my colleagues have spoken very well of the fact that these are not very straightforward. They're incredibly complex, and I appreciate the questions that have been brought up that are directly relevant to what our responsibilities here as commissioners and as our fiduciary responsibility to the next few of county revenues. So I appreciate the diligence that is going into exploring these numbers all the way around. I appreciate the trying to find a number that did make more sense in that context. What I will say, these, first of all, I am very glad to hear, not just out of a risk mitigation for litigation reason, that the 1% property tax is not really being questioned, because what I would say as a constituent who is in the city of Colorado Springs, and as a representative of all of the constituents in my district, they all pay the same amount of the county property tax as as someone who lives in unincorporated county, and yet the majority of how we have chosen to prioritize roads and infrastructure, it does go into the roads and infrastructure in the unincorporated parts of the county. So I'm glad to hear at least the 1% property tax is not being argued about today, because again, my City of Colorado Springs residents and constituents pay the exact same amount of county tax, and that's not always prioritized within their own district. So this is one of very, very few ways that I can advocate within my district. So this particular project is actually in Commissioner Gonzalez's district, but it's very, very closely adjacent to mine. In addition, I don't know if you all are aware, but our health department has a WIC office that is right on that corner, almost under the bridge of Shelton. They are renting a space there. And I do think that that area is much in need of some improvements and of retail and housing that I see will be directly serving probably many of our clients that may come into a WIC office. Right there, there is a tremendous need for housing that is attainable for hardworking people. So this is one way that I feel like I don't always have the opportunity to advocate for my constituents and my area in county processes, and this is one way that I can. I also think that we've had so the discussion point seems to be right now the sales tax portion. I am certainly open to conversations about that. I think we haven't just pulled a number out of thin air. It's been based on some reasonable thought. What I would say about that is that, it's from my recollection of the area, of the entire area. I don't know if your metro district is going to extend outside of this part that's within the URA that we're talking about right now, but there is currently no sales tax basis there. And so the retail that will be added is exactly what we've talked about before. We're talking about tax increment financing. So again, there's a baseline revenue, and everything that we're going to add to this area, we're only talking about this delta in between the two. So I personally think that there's nothing more exciting than having as close as you can get as a 1-to-1 investment and payoff ratio. And I think that TIFs, when judiciously looked at and used for a sales tax where there's currently no sales tax base and no retail, is an incredible asset to this community. And I think that that it would end up really being not only a long-term advantage to the county, but also a long-term advantage to an area of this region that we've long said needs some investment. And if we're going to have a strategic plan that does a better job of pulling in parts of our region that aren't as that don't get a lot of resources, then I think that this is a pretty judicious way to do it, and one that's actually going to pay back, pay for itself over time, as we've seen in the long-term revenues after year 26. So to me, while I am always willing to just make sure that the applicant can walk out in a way that can get much needed work done in our community. I'm more amenable right now to Commissioner Williams' motion. And that being said, I'll just put it on the line and say I'm also amenable to just getting it done if the only way that this is going to work to have anything happen in that region. I'd be okay with the other proposal from the other two commissioners as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I'll make my comments at this point as well, and then I'll ask for a second on Commissioner Williams' motion. In my, some of the key things that I care about is making sure we don't overuse TIFs. The staff knows I talk about that frequently, and I don't know what the right percentage is. It certainly has to be much less than what other public agencies have done around the country and gotten themselves into trouble with. And we've never really settled on that number. But since we're just a little over 1% right now, it seems acceptable to me to continue, but we probably need to continue to have that dialogue in the county about at what point do we say we've got too much investment in TIFs. I'll also make the point, and I appreciate the comments from the developer about how this property here has sat for years and has not been able to get anywhere. And, that's unfortunate. There's a need for housing. Let's hope the economy continues to remain strong and that demand remains there. But in addition to that, it's about housing that's inside, a very busy economic environment as opposed to something that's further out, which then produces other challenges like road infrastructure investment and so forth. Whatever the percentage is or isn't, is still a question that we haven't really, in my humble opinion, ever really settled on. Like, under what conditions would we be accepting 100%, or under what conditions would we be accepting 0, or anything in between? I actually appreciate Commissioner Geithner's and Commissioner Gonzalez's rationale here for trying to establish a number. Is there a parity kind of number between us and the city? That's the kind of dialogue we should be having. I appreciate that. But in this particular case, I think it is really important to get this project completed, get it done with, I want to continue to have the dialogue about these percentages so that we can maybe have kind of some good internal operating rules about what makes sense to us and what doesn't make sense to us. But I do also know that the city has, even though we've sometimes had our challenges in our relationship with the city has invested in some cases just out of appropriateness and necessity. I can say, for example, the city's intention to address Mark Shuffle. They're taking on a lot of that responsibility, and I'm grateful for that. So in this particular case, I think I will also support Commissioner Williams' motion, but I want us to continue to have a dialogue about these numbers and what makes sense and what's the right or what's the wrong balance. And I'm kind of wanting to get there, get to those kinds of discussions. And to be fair to Commissioner Geithner's statements, that's perhaps a little bit about a pathway for us to do that going down into future TIF projects. So actually, I appreciate those comments. So at that point, my apologies. I can't. Did you make a motion to second?
I did the motion. I do appreciate everybody's comments. I made the motion for the original proposal.
Yes.
The one as stated in our...
Is there anybody willing to make a second on Commissioner Williams' motion?
I will second the original motion, and with knowledge of the likely vote about to happen, I do want my two colleagues who lent the greatest deal of discussion to this to know that that's greatly appreciated. And I think in this case, I'm seconding the motion for the original proposal. But this is really good discussion, and I'd like to see it be our starting point later on too.
Great, thank you, Commissioner.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the discussion. I will go through procedural procedures that we do. So I will move to amend the current motion to 100% property tax and 25% sales tax.
Very good. There's a motion to amend. Is there a second on that motion to amend?
I'll second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. So at this point, we will vote on whether to add the amendment to the original motion. Is there any further discussion on the amendment to the motion from any of the commissioners? All right, hearing none. Oh, yes, Commissioner Geithner.
Yes, I'll just add, there's been a spirit of cooperation here. There's been a spirit of moving this forward to a place that makes sense. I appreciate all the comments. I appreciate the constructive dialogue here. I would just say, when we're talking about getting to a point where we have these internal discussions about what makes sense, this is the time to decide what makes sense. I don't know that we have to go back and have internal discussions. We should have this discussion in the public view every time, and that should be very dependent upon the project at hand. So while I appreciate those comments, I just wanted to point out, I actually do think that there's not extra work that needs to be done to make those decisions. This is the appropriate place to have all of the decision, have all of these questions out in the public. This is the public's money, and so it is, I think, fair to have this discussion. I don't think it's out of line. This may be the third hearing, but we have had new information presented at each time, and it is always appropriate in a public setting, in my opinion, to have these robust discussions because the public deserves that kind of transparency. And I appreciate all of the work that we've done here.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate those comments. And specifically to having 3 hearings, all 3 hearings are fair game, aren't they? All 3 hearings are fair game for any inputs or additional conversation. So thank you. All right. Any other comments from any of the commissioners? All right. So we have a motion to amend that we will vote on at this point. If you vote aye, you will be voting for the amendment to reduce the sales tax to 25%, and I think the property tax stays the same in either case. If you vote nay, then you will be voting against that amendment to reduce from a 50% sales tax to a 25% sales tax. Just to make sure, did I state that correctly? Okay, thank you very much. All right, let's proceed with that vote. Commissioner Williams.
No.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Bremer.
No.
And the chair votes nay. That fails on a vote of 3-2. We are now back to the original motion, which is to approve this TIF as stated, as presented by the staff. And that's a 50% for sales tax. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And here I agree with Commissioner Geithner that this is, I didn't want to mention it during the first vote because that was the first vote for the 25, but now we're back to the 50. I do think this is the time we need to talk about it. I think I have brought it up at each of the different meetings, the issues and the concerns, and I think you did see an effort to compromise from the county and unwillingness from the city to compromise to get this done. And so that's the way it reads to me. We do give a lot of comments and feedback at different things, different venues, as it relates to city things, CSU issues throughout the years, and I don't see as much coming from the city on some of these compromises that I think we do. So that's how I see it, but I want this thing to go too. I appreciate it. I stated that I really did not think it was a burden on the city to add an extra 0.25 sales tax to this. I think it makes a whole lot of sense for a project they will save $2 million on. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. And first of all, I appreciate Commissioner Geithner's point about having the conversation in the public forum in this particular case about trying to have a dialogue or negotiation with the city on that. I don't know how we do that in this forum. That has to be another type of conversation, I think. And that is speaking to Commissioner to Commissioner Gonzalez's point. Are there other comments, questions? Yes, Commissioner Williams.
And that's the one question, as I appreciate all of the ideas we've had. They are a fantastic place, for future starting points, but Mr. Walker is hired by the URA. He represents the URA board, not the city. And we would have to have a city-county meeting, essentially, to understand what city council's thoughts are on this. And so that's why I'm pretty firm in sticking what we originally negotiated with, because I think it is a very important project for this area. Very, very, of all the URAs that we have done, which we've done a lot of them, we did one for the Air Force Academy, which it isn't anywhere near as important as what this one is doing. This one is in an area where it is needed. It is in an area that needs more apartments in it, that needs this kind of development. And to me, it makes a lot of sense to put these tax dollars into this area. And my reluctance on coming down and negotiating further actually stems from the fact that I'm a bit nervous throwing this in front of 9 city council members. And because I sometimes listen to their meetings and they just surprise me as well. So it's just, I never quite know exactly where they are going to fall on any issue when I do turn in. And so that's why my reluctance to go down on this has been, is because this is in, county citizens here in the city, and I think it's a really good project, and that's why I've really held firm to my belief that these are the amounts that we need to stay with. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate the comments, especially on the points of things that may have been coordinated and negotiated. So after the vote, maybe we should consider that maybe I volunteer and be the member on the URA for the county representative, so that we have that information and collaboration done earlier in the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate that comment because, if you will, that's part of this public dialogue now about how we can proceed forward and making sure that all of the interests and concerns are addressed. Commissioner Geithner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little concerned about the comment about negotiations previous to this meeting. If there were negotiations about what this should be previous to this meeting, negotiations with anybody, including the city, I was not privy to negotiations. So those comments actually very much concern me. What is in front of us is a proposal that we can either accept or reject, and it is our right as this body to accept or reject it. Whether that happens and there's an agreement that the city wants to take up the rest of that is not relevant to that conversation of whether this is an appropriate amount for us to decide upon, because it is not our duty to, in any situation where you have multiple sides, each side has their own set of interests. Our interest is a responsibility to the county as an organization and the taxpayers. The cities is to the cities and their taxpayers. We are going to have, completely different responsibilities in those situations, but we cannot take on the responsibility of the city in this particular decision. So I just wanted to point that out. There have been no negotiations that I am aware of previously. A vote on this puts the ball back in the city's court, but this is not a pre-negotiated arrangement as far as I am aware, and I just wanted to make that clear.
And I concur. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Commissioner Bremer, I don't know if you were raising your hand to say something or.
I just had a thought. Nikki, can you clarify, are we talking about a difference in $375,000 here?
Commissioners, to answer the question, I believe what we're talking about is about half of the $722,000 number, which would be $361,253. And so the difference in the two proposals between 50% and 25% of our 1% sales tax would be, over the course of 25 years, $361,253, or an average of $14,450 a year.
Say that yearly amount again.
$14,450.
Thank you. I for one think that that's money incredibly well spent on behalf of our citizens.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other comments from any of the commissioners? All right. Seeing none, I think the order of business is to proceed with a vote at this point. Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner?
No.
Commissioner Gonzalez?
Nay.
Commissioner Bremer?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 3-2 at the original proposal. And I'll just express my appreciation to all of the commissioners. Frankly, it speaks to something that I think has been kind of unanswered, that I think we need to continue to have a dialogue about. And we can do that in an open session, maybe a work session, or what have you. It starts to get into other conversations about what the city is doing, where maybe the county benefits, or what the county is doing, where the city benefits, and there is a little of that. If I use the word negotiation, my apologies if that was directed at me. But
And I think in the
it's-
terms of the word negotiation, it's probably not the right term to use, but I consider it probably between the developer, the members of the URA board, which are 12 to 15 or something like that. There's a lot of members of it. And the developer, the URA board, and then the government entities, I guess, who are represented at that board. I don't know exactly how you would say negotiation. I just see Mr. Sullivan picking up his phone, calling the person who's going to issue the financing for this project and saying, we have changes, and it's kind of like underwriting a mortgage, I think. And that's when I say negotiation, that's what I'm thinking about. I can't say, and Mr. Walker's not authorized to negotiate on behalf of the city or to change terms on behalf of the city here. And Mr. Easton is not either. And so that was my comment I don't know which person would be authorized to come in other than the city attorney or the city budget person and really give us an accurate picture of how it would affect the city budget. That's kind of what I meant. So I apologize for using the word negotiation.
And as Commissioner Gonzalez.
Commissioner Gonzalez, go ahead.
And just to clarify, just so that you understand, even if whatever the proper term is on this committee of 10 or 13 people, the county has one representative, the city has 2/3 of the representation, I believe, on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that clarification. I believe this item number 11, is concluded. So thank you, everybody, for your participation, and thank you for coming back at 1 o'clock. And what I'd like to do is just make sure I understand what was completed after I departed. I know that items 12 and 13 were completed. Was 14 and 15 also completed? Okay. And 16 was also completed, that we will not be holding executive session in this meeting. We're going to do it with land use. Okay, very good. So seeing no further business, this 9 a.m. meeting is now adjourned. And we'll give the clerk a few minutes to reconfigure for our land use meeting. Actually, that's a good call. Let's take a quick break for anybody that may need it. Thank you. We'll do a quick break, and we'll come back in about 5 or 7 minutes or so. Thanks. All right, let's go ahead and start this 1 o'clock land use meeting, and my apologies that we started a few minutes late. We had some unfinished business from the 9 a.m. meeting, as you all know, and thank you for your patience. So our first order of business is to call this meeting to order. We do have all 5 commissioners present here on the dais, and let's start through the agenda. Item number 1.
Item number 1 is staff emergency items, and there are no staff emergency items.
Very good. Item number 2.
Item number 2 is changes, postponements, and notice of the next meeting. There's one change to the agenda. We will have an executive session, and the next meeting will be January 10th at the Centennial Hall Auditorium.
Thank you very much. And item number 3.
Item number 3 is public comment on items not scheduled on the agenda. This is the public's opportunity to comment on an item that is not scheduled on today's agenda.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to speak to any item not on the agenda today? And seeing none, just do a check. Anybody online? No, nobody online. Okay, very good. Let's move to item 4.
Item number 4 is the land use consent calendar consisting of item numbers 4A and 4B.
All right, very good. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak to item 4A or 4B? And I don't see anybody coming up. I assume there's nobody online either. So, okay, very good. I'll bring this up to the dais. Are there any comments or questions from any of the commissioners for the consent calendar? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion.
Move to approve item 4A and 4B.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Seeing that there were no questions from the commissioners, let's proceed with the vote. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Bremer.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. Let's move to item number 6.
Item number 5 is the called up consent calendar, and there are no items called up.
Thank
So-
you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for that correction.
You're welcome.
I
Moving
stand
on.
corrected, and we've just now completed item number 5. Now let's move to item 6.
Item number 6 is the planned unit development preliminary plan for Haven Valley, a request by Midco Investments LLC and Fountain Mutual Metro District for approval of a map amendment rezoning from a site-specific PUD planned unit development and RS 6000 residential suburban to site-specific PUD planned unit development and approval of a preliminary plan for 98 single-family residential lots. The parcels are also within the CADO Commercial Airport District overlay. The parcels totaling 11.77 acres are located south of the intersection of Alturas Drive and Cable Lane and are within Section 12, Township 15 South, Range 66 West of the 6th Prime Meridian. Parcel numbers 65122-00011 and 65122-00001. Commissioner District Number 4, file PUD-SP 21007, Carrie Parsons, Senior Planner, Planning and Community Development.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is for the Haven Valley PUD and preliminary plan. I did hand out 3 handouts for you that we received late. Those handouts have been uploaded into EDARP for the public record. One of the handouts with the photos and the accompanying email from Mr. Kyle Fairhorn is in favor of the item today, and Mr. Fairhorn would like to contribute to the hearing via phone when it is appropriate. And the other item that was handed to you at the beginning of the hearing by the clerk, that adjacent property owner would like to be represented via the letter she has written. She did not make it to the hearing as of yet. So if she does end up coming, we will make note of that. One quick clarification for this item. There was a question about the comments that were attached to the staff report from the Colorado Springs Airport Advisory. Those comments are correct. The Airport Advisory Commission did not have any objections, and they did recommend the item be approved with the standard conditions. So at the time of final plat, the applicants will be requested by the airport and staff to provide the disclosure notice and the standard plat notes.
And if I could, just on that point, is there also a requirement for a DB installation on that as well, coming out of Airport Advisory Commission? And if you don't know the answer, we can just proceed with the hearing and you can maybe work on getting that answer.
I do not know that, but it's certainly at the time of final plat. Once again, the airport will be asked to be a review body, and future conditions, if needed to be added, can be added at that time, sir.
Thank you.
Again, if there is anybody watching, please email PCD Hearings if you would like to participate in the hearing. Again, this is a request for a site-specific PUD that includes 98 units that are attached. This request would amend that existing site-specific PUD to allow both detached units as well as attached units. The density is not proposed to be increased. The roads proposed before you today with this site-specific PUD now meet the ECM standards. The previous PUD, they did not. And they are also requesting for a finding of water sufficiency with this application, which would then authorize the executive director to approve the final plats administratively. Both the county attorney's office and the health department have made a favorable recommendation regarding water sufficiency. The applicant is also requesting pre-site development grading with utilities. And with that said, I would like permission to ask the county attorney to read into the record the approval, or excuse me, the criteria of approval for both the PUD and the preliminary plan.
Great, so granted.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Lori Seega with the County Attorney's Office. I'll summarize the criteria for this item, which are set forth on the screen in front of you. Because this is a combined application, a planned unit development and a preliminary plan, you must find that both sets of criteria are met in order to approve this single item. So the criteria for a planned unit development rezone are that the proposed PUD district zoning advances the stated purposes set forth in the relevant section of the Land Development Code, that the application is in general conformance with the master plan and in compliance with the requirements of the Land Development Code, that the subject property is suitable for the intended uses and the uses compatible with both the existing and allowed land uses on neighboring properties, that the proposed development provides adequate consideration for any potentially detrimental use-to-use relationships and provides appropriate transitions or buffering, that the allowed uses and other zoning type requirements are appropriate to and compatible with the type of development and surrounding area, that areas with unique or significant historical, cultural, recreational, aesthetic, or natural features are preserved and incorporated into the project, that open spaces and trails are integrated into the development plan, that the proposed development will not overburden the capacities of existing public infrastructure, including roads, utilities, and other public facilities, that the proposed development would be a benefit through the provision of interconnected open space, conservation of environmental features, aesthetic features, and harmonious design, and energy-efficient site design, that the proposed land use does not permit the use of any area containing a commercial mineral deposit in a manner which would unreasonably interfere with extraction of that deposit, that any proposed exception or deviation from the requirements of the zoning resolution or subdivision regulations is warranted, and that the owner has authorized the application. In order to approve a PUD modification of a general development standard in the Land Development Code, as has been requested in connection with this application, you are required to make the following findings, to find that one of the following benefits will be provided by granting such a modification or deviation request. Preservation of natural features, provision of a more livable environment, provision of a more efficient pedestrian system, provision of additional open space, provision of other public amenities not otherwise required, or that the proposed modification is granted in exchange for the open space or amenity designs provided in the PUD development plan. And then finally, we come to the criteria for approval for a preliminary plan, which is a subdivision action. That the proposed subdivision is in general conformance with the master plan and the purposes of the code, that the subdivision is in conformance with the subdivision design standards and any approved sketch plan, that a sufficient water supply has been acquired in terms of quantity, quality, and dependability, that a public sewage disposal system has been established, or if other methods of sewage disposal are proposed, that they comply with state and local laws and regulations, that all areas of the proposed subdivision which may involve soil or topographical conditions presenting hazards have been identified, and that the subdivision is compatible with those conditions, that adequate drainage improvements are provided, that the location and design of the public improvements proposed in connection with the subdivision are adequate to serve the needs of the development, that legal and physical access will be provided to all parcels, that the subdivision meets all other applicable sections of Chapters 6 and 8 of the Land Development Code, that the proposed subdivision has established an adequate level of compatibility by incorporating the 5 principles set forth on the screen, that necessary services, including police and fire protection, recreation, utilities, open space, and a transportation system, are or will be available to serve the development, that the subdivision provides evidence to show that the proposed methods for fire protection comply with Chapter 6 of the Land Development Code, and that's it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
All right, this item was heard before the Planning Commission, and it was approved unanimously. I do have an answer for you, Chair, and at this point in time, the airport has not requested a decimal reduction. However, like I said, we'll make sure that we resend this at the final plat in case they do want to add that additional requirement.
Great, thank you.
Letters of concern that were uploaded into EDARP and discussed by adjacent property owners at the Planning Commission were regarding the impacts of drainage for this development for the downstream property owners, as well as for those property owners upstream. There was discussions about the traffic in the area, and there was also discussion about concerns with the small lot sizes that were already approved, and then what was going to be approved now, as well as the narrow roads. But once again, just a quick reminder that even though the roads are requested to be private, they are going to be built to county road standards. And with that said, I'd like to ask permission for the applicant to provide a brief presentation.
Yes, please.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrea Barlow with NES, representing the landowner. Also have Tim McConnell from Drexel Burrell, who will talk briefly about drainage improvements on the site. Okay, so this is a site location. It's located west of Bradley Road, southwest of the intersection of Bradley, southeast of the intersection of Bradley and Hancock Expressway, and just off Cable Lane. There are surrounding uses to the north and west are churches. There is a townhome development opposite the northwest corner. I'm getting my directionals mixed up today. And single family on the south side and just wrapping around the southeast corner. So the zoning is currently PUD, and I want to just mention briefly the airport overlay. It's a CAD overlay, Commercial Airport District Overlay. It generally is only within the airport APZ zones, the subzones, that any decibel reduction is required, not in the CAD generally. So one of the things I want to emphasize is that there is actually a previous approval on this site. It was approved in 2007 for 98 single-family attached residential lots. The only thing we're really changing here is we're asking for the residential units to be detached. And so everything else is exactly the same. The layout is pretty much the same. The road layout you'll see is the same. We've maintained the buffer tracks to the south and southeast and along the other boundaries that were previously proposed. In the original plan, there was a requirement to make the lots, as you can probably see, on the south side and wrapping around the east there a little bit bigger to provide a better transition with the neighbors to the south and southeast. And also, at that time, the plan also proposed private streets, and it also proposed an off-site detention pond off the west corner there. So everything that was previously proposed we're carrying forward. So this is the original plan, and this is what we're proposing today. And it is still proposing 98 units, 98 lots. The only difference is, like I say, we're asking for single-family detached. We are also asking for single-family attached to still be allowed on the property so that we don't have to come back for a rezone. if the product type changes again. So we still want to keep that option, but at the moment we're proposing single-family detached. Again, the buffers have been maintained as previously proposed, meeting the county's requirement of a 15-foot buffer with landscaping adjacent to less intense uses of the single family to the south and southeast. The uses along the western boundary and to the north are church sites, so they are the buffering is less along those boundaries, but consistent with the previous plan. Private roads are still being maintained, and also stormwater detention in exactly the same location as previously proposed. Just quickly on the master plan, it is an area of minimal change developed, which is identified as being areas that are largely developed but may contain pockets of underutilized land. This property is surrounded by existing development. It's a very typical infill site. It warrants development. It will be developed at some point for something. It already has approval for single-family residential attached, and we're following through with a very similar plan. And in the place types, it's shown as suburban residential, and that is consistent with mostly single-family detached with supporting single-family attached or multifamily. So whether we ultimately, it pans out as single-family detached or attached, it would be consistent with the suburban residential place type. So we have had a few neighbour concerns which we want to touch upon, both in correspondence and a few neighbours spoke at the Planning Commission meeting. So traffic was a concern. We have performed a traffic impact study which was assessed by the County Engineering Department, and that concludes that there is no requirement for any off-site improvements with this development. As I noted, it had already been previously approved and had been accounted for in terms of the overall network in the area, and we're not adding any more lots to the development. Only one way in and out was one comment. The property has two access points. The northern access point connects at the intersection of Cable Lane and Alturas Drive, and that goes out to Bradley. And then Cable Lane, we have another entry point onto Cable Lane just to the east of that, and Cable Lane then does continue, it goes through the neighbourhood, but then it does continue to connect to Bradley further south. So there are 2 points of access to the development. Obscuring views of the Front Range, I would maintain that that is not a planning criteria, but we feel that the development of the single-family detached instead of attached would provide more opportunity for those views from the west, to the west from the properties on the east. So it's really only the few properties on the eastern boundary that could have that impact. The lowering the values of the surrounding homes, this was a point of discussion. We don't know exactly what the value of these homes will be because we don't know who the builder is at this point. But they're probably going to be typical entry-level homes in the probably 400, 450,000 range. And we don't believe that will lower the value of the adjacent properties. Will there be governance for the development? There were concerns about it becoming a slum and becoming untidy. There is proposed the homeowners association will be proposed to control the development and put in general conditions and criteria for the residents to abide by. Enough parking. All the lots are proposed with a 20-foot setback to allow a driveway, a full driveway. So as originally designed, I will go back, it was originally designed with a particular home builder in mind. They since backed out, but moving forward, the landowner wanted to move forward with the rezone anyway. And all the lots have been designed to accommodate a full two-car, a garage, and a full two-car driveway, plus some of the streets where it's on the end of the units will allow for some on-street parking. And then the final concern was regarding the detention. Somebody in the townhomes, one lady, I think you had a letter expressed concern about impact on upstream drainage. And then there were also comments about how the detention would come through to the south. So I'm going to ask Mr. McConnell to briefly address that point, and then we'll sum up.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Tim McConnell with Drexel Burrell. Quick overview of the drainage. We are installing this full-spectrum detention pond. It's off-site in a drainage easement that the property has acquired. It will basically serve as a detention pond for, it's about a 40 to 45 acre tributary area upstream, bunch of off-site area that's not even our site. We will reduce the flows discharging the site at the southwest corner. Currently discharges between two houses. Easements were acquired by the property owner years ago to be able to go in and make some improvements between those houses so the two houses there aren't flooded any longer. We're going to reduce the flows coming between those two houses by about 80% with the installation of this detention pond and our facilities with the pond. So we're alleviating the downstream effects of the drainage. There won't be any impact to upstream. All the upstream flows come into this pond and then leave via this route. There will be a pipe system that goes down to Widefield Boulevard, and then an overflow, we call a flume or a chase between the houses in case the spillway on the pond does overtop to alleviate those concerns. And it will reduce the flows, stormwater flows down Widefield Drive or Boulevard in future storm events when it's developed as well. So quick overview. If you do have any questions, I'm here as well to answer anything we can.
Great. Just a quick question for me. Saw some of the pictures of that water going between the two houses. So where are those two houses located respect to this map? They're off the property. They're already existing homes.
They're existing homes. There's one right here and one right here on that. This is where
So they're in that southwest corner.
correct.
So
This is
the retention pond would divert the water before it got to them. You said about 80%.
80. It will retain, we'll detain the flows here and release at a much slower rate than what currently discharges between those houses. I say we'll reduce the flows by about 80%.
Okay, great. Commissioner?
Yes, and in addition to, reducing that by 80%, my assumption is that currently this is an undeveloped blank graded lot, which is contributing to the water flowing that way in the first place.
Yes.
Yeah, so, the detention pond will capture before it gets that way, but my guess is once the building and construction starts and that's fully built out and not just an empty graded lot, that takes care of the majority of the rest of it too.
Yes.
Okay, great. Other questions at this point? All right, let's proceed.
Really just wrapping up at the end, just saying we're consistent with the master plan, consistent with the previous approved PUD plan for the property, and believe we meet all the relevant criteria for PUDs and preliminary plans. Happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner, it looks like you've got a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to clarify a couple things based on what I saw on the application. How do the number of units compare in this proposal as the previous proposal?
They're exactly the same.
And the units per acre density?
It's exactly the same. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? I do have one other question myself, and that's water supply. If you could just refresh my memory on how water will be supplied to this.
This property, Tim McConnell with Drexel Burrell again. This property is within the Security Water and Sanitation District, and they have provided will serve letters. They will provide water and wastewater service to the project.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? All right, is there any other staff presentation for us to continue to go through?
Staff does have a presentation. Would you like to see it or?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think no objection. Please proceed, yeah.
Okay. Okay, just want to point out, sorry, I'm not familiar with how this pointer works, so I'll just kind of talk through it. As you can see, I've labeled the site. The property caddy corner to the northwest is the townhome development. That little undeveloped area that you see, I'm going to walk over.
It's that open area underneath the homes that are marked in yellow squares, right?
Oh, tall people,
Yeah,
thank
there
you.
we go. Okay. Excellent.
Yes, thank you. That is an existing detention pond, and I believe one of the letters that you all received and that was uploaded into EDARP does reference that existing detention pond, so I wanted to point that out to you. South of that, the green parcel is a church as well as a community solar garden, and that property. I'm learning this is a little different than your regular forum. That property is the area next to the solar garden that will have the new detention pond. The solar garden will not be impacted with the development of that pond. And then to the south of that, you can see the two homes that will be impacted. One of the photos that you did receive is from the gentleman that would like to speak in favor of this. He does live next to that easement, and so he is online when we're ready. An aerial view of the property. Andrea did a great job going over the background. I just want to point out one thing. The previous density was about 8.3 units per acre, and the same density would be occurring now. There is one difference in lot size. Previously, the minimum lot size was about 2,975 square feet. With this moving to single-family detached, you're looking at a slight variation down to 2,900 square feet for the individual lot size. That's basically the most substantial difference between the two PUDs. Okay. Master plan consistency, staff did make a recommendation that the application does meet the master plan. In terms of specific area of change designation, this area was noted as a transition area, so it was anticipated to change. So if this development is approved as it is requested, it will be consistent with the area of change in our current master plan. In terms of the water master plan, again, the county attorney's office and state engineer and the health department have made a favorable finding. Security Water and Sanitation has provided a commitment letter to serve water and wastewater, and staff did make a recommendation that this application is consistent with that current water master plan. Any questions on the master plan or water master plan?
Any questions from any of the commissioners so far? Okay, thank you.
And with permission, I'd like to ask Mr. Torres to come up and talk a little details on engineering.
Afternoon, Commissioners. Daniel Torres with Engineering. In regards to traffic and transportation, as was indicated, there are two proposed access points to Cable Lane. All the internal roadways are proposed to be privately maintained. They do meet the standard county pavement widths. The associated traffic study indicated that no improvements were required, and specifically at Alturas and Bradley Road, traffic signal warrants were not met. The subject property would be, the property would be subject to the road impact fee. There we go. In regards to drainage, drainage fees would be due at the time of plat recordation. It's in the security drainage basin. As was indicated, there is a private full spectrum detention pond that is off-site that will mitigate the development's flows. The pond does provide detention for this site and upstream of the site, as was indicated by Mr. McConnell. And the preliminary drainage report shows that the flow will continue in historic patterns and improve the downstream conditions. Are there any questions for me?
Any questions at this point? I have one, but I'll hold it in reserve in case anybody else has any. All right, just
Yes,
with regard to the roads themselves, I presume that parking on the street it will be acceptable, and it's hard for me to tell from this map, but they look kind of narrow.
They are
Okay.
local low volume, which is our smallest cross-section of a 24-foot paved width, but parking is allowed with that standard
Okay.
width.
Under those conditions, is there any trouble having emergency vehicles access the area, like fire?
There was no objections from the fire district.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Yes, Commissioner Williams?
I would just say I think that's about the width of the roads in my subdivision, our paired patio homes where we live. And the fire truck's pretty good at getting through there. It's amazing to watch.
Okay. Good.
Right, and I just want to also conclude that the PUD does require a minimum 10% open space contribution. This proposed plan actually is proposing 14%, and the applicants have depicted a little trail system corridor on the, it's kind of off the screen here, on the northeast corner that will connect to the open space just south of this project and to the east. In addition, I should have covered that, apologize for not doing that. Are there any other questions for staff regarding this application?
Maybe just one other question. With regard to the retention pond, just because of the way the previous map was colored, I couldn't ascertain if that retention pond land is actually owned by the developer or not. It's just because the color of the development area didn't include the retention pond.
Sure. Actually, that is an off-site detention pond, and it is going. The property owner has already obtained a drainage easement to construct that facility. So we would technically call it an off-site pond to be maintained by this development or HOA, but not owned by this development HOA.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Other questions? All right, none at this time.
I do believe we have one person online, if Blake was able to call them in, that is going to speak for the application.
All right, very good. And since we have no further questions for staff presentation at this moment, let's do call on those citizens that would like to testify in favor of this item. And do we have someone online? Okay. I know this is going to be a little bit awkward here, but we'll be able to work through it.
We tried to work the kinks out before we got here. Okay.
We'll give you whatever time you need to get it set up.
Could you point to that thing? Could you point that one again?
Don't make me do that. That's like math in public.
Please re-enter your PIN number now. Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging system.
Why don't you give it another try? Sure. We'll give you the time you need to try and make this connection. Oh, thank you. That thing is huge. Wow.
Your call has been forwarded to an automated voice messaging.
Okay.
Should I try to call him from my cell phone? Is it Teams or is it?
All right. Did this person that wanted to testify in favor, was that the person with had the photographs?
Yes, sir. And they're the person that lives south, so they would be directly impacted if the development were to move forward and the detention pond and the drainage were corrected by this developer. This person would benefit the most.
Okay. I guess what we can do is we do have some materials, and I'll just ask the clerk. This is part now of the public record.
The clerk will mark it as an exhibit to the record since it
Okay.
was handed out after.
Thank you very much. I'll just maybe ask the staff, we're going to continue to proceed with the hearing, but maybe we'll just give them one more chance, and if we do connect with them, please just let me know, and we'll give them an opportunity at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So let me just ask if there's any member of the public that would like to speak in opposition to this proposal at this point. And I don't see anybody coming forward. I just got to ask if there's anybody online. There's nobody online? Okay. We have some documentation that's entered into the record, both for and against, so we have that as a matter of record. And I just want to ask the developer if you wish to provide any additional comments. Normally, this would be to rebut any testimony that would be in opposition typically. Yes, Commissioner?
So if I can ask on behalf of the one that I saw, there's some opposition, saying if this were to move forward, would there be any issues with extending was it like a view, the 6-foot opaque fencing to the other sides that were perhaps not proposed, or landscaping?
There is a fence proposed all the way around, 6-foot opaque, correct, Jordan? Cedar fence, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much, because she had the impression it was just two sides.
No, it's going all the way around. It's just that the buffer is narrower on the west and the north side, because there isn't actually a buffer requirement, so to speak, because it's not a less intense use, not a single-family residential use. The one thing I will say, though, that we did say at the hearing, some of the folks who lived to the east who were concerned about their views were concerned about the buffer tree planting that we were proposing per code requirements. So we did say that we would work with them to make sure it wasn't blocking their view.
Okay. Commissioner, I appreciate your asking that question, because I did see that in the record as well.
And I appreciate the response there. And so, the lady did send in, I think it was Susan, sent in the response. A lot of people don't understand when they send in responses to us, and I responded back only that we will be adding this to the record. And, when they ask for, how is this, and she'd like to discuss to the public, because of the quasi-judicial nature of these, we're not allowed to get into discussions because they're outside discussions. We need to make those decisions and discussions in public forum where all of the county commissioners get the same information. So if you are listening, ma'am, I just wanted to say I was able to get everything added. I addressed at least one of the issues that came up from the lady, and I definitely appreciated her feedback, but I couldn't come back to you with one-on-one discussions on this because we have to do this in public. But I'm greatly appreciative that at least one of her issues was addressed here.
Anything else?
Great. Any other questions from any of the commissioners? All right, seeing none. And again, do we have someone online? Oh, great.
So we're going to do it, if it's okay, I'll put him on speaker on my cell phone. We weren't able to connect Teams, but he did call in via cell phone, if that's okay?
Okay, is this the individual testifying in favor?
Yes, sir.
Okay, very good. Yeah, and I guess you'll do the best you can to get that speaker into that microphone there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, sir, you are ready, and it is your turn to speak.
Okay. My name is Kyle, and I'm at 412 Pecos Drive. I've been negatively impacted in the past from the drainage flooding development. I'm glad now that it is. I've read over all the preliminary plans, drainage reports, things like that, and it's like the very, very good plan. It's also going to benefit me. Also benefits my neighbors at 416 Pecos. So I'm definitely for it, and I have no opposition to them starting. So I'm, like I said, I'm glad that they're finally doing something about it.
Very good. Just to check, can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can hear you.
Excellent. So I appreciate your testimony. I believe you were the gentleman that also provided the photographs of the water runoff as well. Is that correct?
I did.
Yes, thank you. We do have that in front of us. And I'll just ask if any of the commissioners have questions for this individual. Yes.
Can we just have him state his name for the record, please?
Oh, thank you. And, sir, would you be kind enough to state your name for the record so we can have it on record?
Yes. First name's Kyle, and last name is Fairthorn.
All right. Thank you very much. Is that acceptable? Okay, very good. Thank you for your testimony. Appreciate your time. All right, we got 95% of that.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's the best we can do, I think, under the circumstances. All right, very good. And I don't know if the applicant wants to speak further or not at this point. No? All right, very good. Let me close the public hearing then and bring this up to the dais. Are there any questions or comments from any of the commissioners at this point?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is in my district. I do want to say I am supportive of this for several reasons. I do think it is in compliance with the plan and all our authorities to support it. What really stood out is, of course, that this is something that was previously approved in generally the same format, the same density, the same number of units, and so it wasn't somebody coming back and trying to double the density or something like that. It's something in line with what was previously approved, and I did like the fact that the developer, whose representative, was able to highlight the fact that they did try to mitigate some of the concerns already, and looks like they're willing to do that as well moving forward. So I'll be supportive of this, but wait till the other comments before I make a motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other? Yes, Commissioner Geithner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just quickly wanted to note that since this is also a finding of water sufficiency, I think it's a good time to talk about the fact that here in El Paso County, we do have a 300-year water rule. I know that that continues to be a concern with the community, but since that is a part of this, that has been provided and has been looked at by staff to provide that recommendation. So that's a good thing moving forward here, but just wanted to highlight that for the record.
Great. I appreciate the highlight of that point. Thank you. Any other comments from any of the commissioners? All right. I don't think we have any more comments. Commissioner Gonzalez, as you know, in your district, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move to approve item 6.
Second.
And that's been moved and seconded, and I don't think there are any further questions. Let's proceed with a vote. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Bremer.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. Congratulations to the developer. We look forward to seeing some great homes in that area. Thank you so much. All right, let's move on to item number 7.
Item number 7 is department and committee reports, non-action items, and there are none.
Very well. Item number 8.
Item number 8 is the executive session, and I believe there is one. I will defer to the county attorney to read that into the record.
All right, and item number 8 is the addendum, but that's okay.
I'm sorry. Item number 8 is the addendum, and there are no addendums today.
Awesome, thank you. And item number 9.
Item number 9 is the executive session, and I will defer to Mr. Hodges to read that into the record.
All right, Mr. Hodges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute Section 24-6-4024B, the County Attorney's Office is requesting an executive session pertaining to a request from the City and County of Denver Office of Emergency Management to assist with sheltering a surge of migrants and asylum seekers, to include a conference with the County Attorney's Office for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions related to the county's legal authority and obligations. Kenny Hodges, County Attorney.
Very good, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners regarding the topic for the executive session? And hearing none, I think we'll have, I just asked the question, do we intend on holding it in here, or will we be moving?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest holding it here. I think we have a pretty limited number of folks here. I know some smaller jurisdictions would remove the people there, and by a simple count on one hand, I think that there are more of us than them.
Okay, very good. And before I ask for motion as well, I think I saw Jim Reed here. He was probably here for this executive session. Is he somewhere out there in the hallway or something? Or
Mr. Chair, I believe he had an appointment, and he'll be available by phone. Either he or Lonnie will be available for input from OEM.
All right, very good. All right, thank you. Any last questions or comments from any of the commissioners?
I move we go into executive session for the purposes stated on the record.
Second.
That's been moved and seconded. Let's go ahead and proceed with a vote. Commissioner Williams.
Aye.
Commissioner Geithner.
Aye.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Aye.
Commissioner Bremer.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. That passes 5-0. We are now in executive session. I think we can probably just go ahead and proceed unless you need a minute to set up. Does anybody need to take a break? Okay, very good. Let's go ahead and proceed then.
Mr. Chair, if I could have just a moment to log into the screen here and get the recording set up.
That's great. We'll give you that time. Just let us know when you're ready.
Bring chairs.